1, 2, 3.
Welcome to the show.
Can you?
Energy, grab me in positive synergy. I have been doubted through life. Been there and done that with trifling people who told me my style will not work. I told them they wrong. They're struggling too long. This song is for you. I'm proving you wrong. Get out my way. 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 Get out my way.
When we could be superstars, we've been rather wrecking cars.
Hey bro, is that Jambo?
What is that stage for us? Kicking up cameras. Yeah, we could be superstars, but I'm pretty sure our time is up. And so we fell off the spinning tops.
ATL Jacob. Say you my be your killer, nobody gon' play with you when I'm with you. Go against any like this glitter, skeet all dirt on bitches. I put it in for you, I spin for you, whatever you with, I'm with it. How you gon' cross the rockin' with you, I got you lit in the city. I been multitasking, rapping and being the daddy to my little children. I been spinning on business and spinning and spinning and spinning until I'm dizzy. I do all the smack, you ain't never step or help with none of you killing. You doing a lot of capping, watch when I catch, I'ma whack you in front of the witness. My you trippin', we could've been superstars. Remember when we were jacking cars? Now it's not safe for you. You switch like a my you trippin'. We could've been superstars. Can't help it, now I'm reminiscing. Remember when we were jacking cars? Now you better keep your distance, cause it's not safe for you. You switch like a track hard with the kick, snatch off from the when I slide, nightlight on the blick. Bet I'm on my when I'm outside. So them ran down, caught them pants down. I knew the perk was fake, but I still ate it, cause I'm a gremlin. Yeah, cut those bending, KTV, back door wide open. Wasting my sniper, get out. All you gon' die, time rolling. Bustin' on my opponent, no half stepping. Crush my arms totally, wood jet broke, no motion. Sleeping on sofas, creeping in highs like roaches. I done went cages, stages of cage. Now free me, baby, can't keep me, baby. I beat them cases, they already hate me. They gon' want me dead when I'm on probation. Oh, y'all think, look, yeah. Y'all ain't seen nothing yet, I promise. Can't take me, can't guard me. I be on like Charmin, aka 28 Carvin. We could've been superstars. Remember when we were jacking cars? Now it's not safe for you. You switch like a my you trippin'. We could've been superstars. Can't help it, now I'm reminiscing. Remember we were jacking cars? Now you better keep your distance, cause it's not safe for you. You switch like a track hard with the kick, snatch off on the when I slide, nightlight on the blick. Bet I'm on my when I'm outside. So they done ran down, call them pants down. I knew the perk was fake, but I still ate it, cause I'm a gremlin.
Yeah, we could be superstars,
Super gremlin.
but I'm pretty sure our time is up.
Now your time
And
is
so
up.
we fell off the spinning tops. Don't know, maybe for trial, but way more error.
I ain't sliming, I'm grinding. Any way you put it, I'm SG with it. I'm a super gremlin. Snatch and grab, sneak and geek, like we gang.
What up, what up, what up, what up? What up, y'all?
You know, I bet you always
What's
see
good?
in your dream.
What's good? Good morning, good morning, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Atmos Love Zone. Y'all, listen, man. Listen, it's about time. I just realized that there was some transcripts that got released, so I just bought these right here for Travell Anthony Hill. This is the guy who was alleged to have actually murdered Dre, which was the nephew of Tim Norman on Sweetie Pies. He was the one who actually pulled the trigger with that setup, okay? So we are going to read the transcripts that came straight from this man's mouth. Let me see who up in here rocking with me on this morning. Y'all, it is 12:30 in the morning. So I'm going to say, let me be the first one to say good morning. Today is Thursday, December 22nd, East Coast time. So if y'all's on the West Coast, it's still Wednesday where y'all at. But over here, it is now Thursday. So let me see who up in here. Sonia Davis, hello. How are you? Karen's Way, hello. Eva, what's up, Granny? How are you? What's going on? Riri, what up, Riri? How are you? Latrice B, what's good? Let me see. April Showers is in the building. West Coast in the building. What's going on? What's going on? Nunya, what up, Nunya? How are you? Okay, cool. Yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, the baby, okay, yeah. The baby, okay. Baby, good, Nunya. You got the cutest little baby, man. You got the cutest little baby. All right, y'all. So check this out. So we're going to be reading these transcripts as time goes on. I have an amazing team of readers, Riri being one, and some others. We got Riri. Nanya helps read. We had CJ. We had who we have? King Johan. We had a lot of people out there that love to help us read these transcripts. So we about to get back into it, y'all. On this Tim, I'm gonna focus on this Tim Norman Sweetie Pie's case. Okay, it's a lot going on with that. But we never had a chance to really read and see what really happened in that courtroom. So I want to take these one at a time. We're going to start with Travell Anthony Hill. We're going to start with the shooter. I want to see, because he would know. He'll be able to give us all the inside scoop on exactly what happened behind the scenes and how he got wrapped up into this. And then we're going to move on to Tim Norman and see what he had to say. As y'all know, he did testify in court himself. So let me go ahead and let me pull this up real quick. Matter of fact, and what I will do, I will go ahead and post a link in the chat just in case anybody wants to come on and help read. It's only about 28 pages, so this is not going to be a long live. I can knock through it, but I do want to be, if anyone did want to come on and read, let me turn my interview mode on. Give me a minute here. I know it's late for some of y'all, so you don't have to come up and read. I just, I know a lot of people in here do like to help out. So I'm just going to put this in here. If you come on, great. If you don't worry about it. We are good either way. Okay, we good either way. But I'll put this in here. Let me go ahead and paste it. There we go. Boom. There it is. And then let me go ahead and click it right here. Thank you, West Coast Bells. I like that. It's all a mystery until you read. That's true. All right, y'all. Let me pin this. I'm going to pin the message to the top. So anyone wants to come in and help me read, you're more than welcome. Okay? But however, we're going to go ahead and get started, y'all. We're going to go ahead and get started. Here we go. So this right here, these are the transcripts for United States of America versus Travell Anthony Hill, who was the defendant. This is the plea hearing here before the Honorable Judge A. Ross. Let's see here. So this is the, let's get into this. This was on June 3rd, 2022. The proceedings commenced at 2:10 p.m. The court says we are here and on record in the case of United States versus Travell Anthony Hill. It is case number 420 CR 418. I know, right? It says here the record should reflect that the defendant, Mr. Hill, appears in person with counsel, Mr. Peter Cohen. The United States appears by Assistant United States Attorney Angie Dennis. Mr. Hill appears here today having been charged in the multiple defendant indictment. Mr. Hill is charged on count 1 with conspiracy to commit murder for hire resulting in death. Count 2 charges him with murder for hire resulting in death. And those are the 2 counts in which he is charged with. The court has set in this matter for a status conference. In the interim, I understand there was an agreement based on a plea agreement for Mr. Hill to withdraw his former plea of not guilty, enter into a plea of guilty to those charges in counts 1. Is that correct, Mr. Cohen? Mr. Cohen says that's correct, Your Honor. The court says, and Mr. Hill, have you heard your attorney's announcement that you are here today based on a written guilty plea agreement? It is your intent to withdraw your former pleas of not guilty and enter pleas of guilty to those charges in counts 1 and 2. And as I stated on the record, is that correct, sir? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge then says, and if that's what you intend to do, it is necessary for me to ask you a number of questions. I need you to listen carefully to this. If there's anything that you don't understand, I want you to stop me and ask me to repeat it or explain it to you. I want you to stop me and ask, okay, explain this to, or again, you can ask for time to talk to your attorney, but I want to make sure that you understand everything that's going on here today. Do you understand, Mr. Hill? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge says, it is also necessary for you to give full, complete, and truthful answers to my questions. Your answers are under oath, which means under penalty of perjury. So at this time, if you will raise your right hand, I will ask you, the clerk, to administer the oath. So Mr. Travell Hill is now under oath, y'all. He's now under oath. And he says, being produced and sworn, testifies as follows. By the court, will you state your full name for the court? He says his name is Travell Anthony Hill. The judge says, and your date of birth, sir? Travell says 6/12/1991. The judge says, and again, Mr. Hill, you have indicated, your attorney has indicated, you are here today. You're going to enter pleas of guilty to these charges in counts 1 and 2. Again, count 1 charges you with the offense of conspiracy to commit murder for hire resulting in death, and count 2 charges you with the murder for hire resulting in death. And you intend to plead guilty to those charges. Is that correct? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge says, I want to start by asking some questions just to make sure that your mind is clear. So let me start by asking if you are under the influence of any drugs or alcohol. Mr. Hill says, no, sir. The judge says, are you taking any medication of any kind? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge says, what kind of medication are you taking? Mr. Hill says, blood pressure. The judge says, have you been taking that medication for some time? Mr. Hill says, no, sir. Let me turn my volume down so y'all don't hear no echo. Hold on. There we go. He says, no, sir. The judge says, when did you start taking it? Mr. Hill said a few months ago. Hold on, y'all. The judge said Mr. Hill said a few months ago. The judge says, so in these last few months, you know how that medication affects you. Is that correct? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge says, my point is, the medication doesn't interfere with your ability to know what you are doing. Mr. Hill said, no, sir. So the judge is trying to make sure that they're not going to try to come out on no appeal and try to say that he told the judge he was on drugs or he was high and he didn't know what he was saying. So he can't say that. So that's what they're doing. They're crossing their I's and crossing their T's and dotting their I's. Okay? Here we go. The judge says, and your mind is clear. Is that correct? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge says, are you taking any other medication? Mr. Hill says, no, sir. The judge says, any other issues with your physical health that would affect your ability to be here today or to understand this proceeding? Mr. Hill says, no, sir. The judge says, any problems with your mental health? Mr. Hill says, no, sir. The judge says, have you ever been diagnosed with mental condition, a mental illness, a mental disease of any kind? Mr. Hill said, no, sir. Judge says, so again, are you here today? Your mind is clear. You know exactly what you are doing. Is that correct? Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. The judge says, how far did you go in school, sir? Mr. Hill said, I made it to the 12th grade. The judge says, do you have a high school diploma or GED? Mr. Hill said, no, sir. The judge says, well, can you read, write, understand the English language? Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. Let me bring my video over here, y'all. Hold on one moment. Let me pull this over here. There we go. All right, let's get back to this. The judge says, can you read, write, understand the English language? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge says, and again, you are telling me you understand what's going on here today. You understand this proceeding. Is that correct? Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. Judge said, and Mr. Cohen, I know you have had an opportunity to, speak at length with Mr. Hill. Look into his background and his history. Do you have any reason to believe that he would not be competent to proceed or not capable of understanding this proceeding? Mr. Cohen says, no, I do not, Your Honor. The judge says, by the court, Mr. Hill, I'll just ask you, sir, do you believe you are competent to proceed and capable of understanding this procedure? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge says, and based on the answers and evidence, the court finds that the defendant, Travell Anthony Hill, is competent to proceed and capable of understanding the proceeding. Now, Mr. Hill, you are here today with Mr. Cohen. I know he has represented you pretty much throughout this whole case. I just want to ask you generally, have you had enough time to talk to him about your case? Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. The judge says he has answered all of your questions. Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. The judge says he has done everything you have asked him to do in this case. Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. The judge says, I know during the pandemic, communication between attorneys and clients have been, more difficult. But again, you are telling me that Mr. Cohen has done everything you have asked him to do, and you are satisfied with his services. Is that correct? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge says, do you believe that you have been fully advised as to all the aspects of your case, including your legal rights and the possible consequences of your pleas of guilty here today? Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. The judge says, I want to go over with you your right to a trial if you choose not to enter a plea of guilty. Do you understand you have a right to a speedy and public trial by a judge or jury in this case? Do you understand that? Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. The judge says, do you understand that you will be entitled to the services of a lawyer if you cannot afford a lawyer? One will be appointed for you. Do you understand that? Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. So, y'all, look, so far it's looking like this guy is pretty competent. He knows exactly what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's pleading. So, hey, should be a pretty simple thing. So, the judge says, do you understand that you will be entitled to a trial by jury made up of 12 people, all of whom would have to agree as to your guilt before you could be found guilty, and that at the trial, you will be presumed to be innocent. The government will have the burden of proving you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Do you understand that? Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. So once again, he's telling them, listen, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. Okay? Judge then says, do you understand that the government, let me move my picture over a little bit, y'all. Do you understand that the government would attempt to meet its burden of proof by producing evidence and witnesses here in open court? Your attorney could cross-examine those witnesses that you could present evidence and witnesses on your behalf. And if you asked that the court would issue subpoenas for witnesses to come in here for you. Do you understand all of that, sir? Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. The judge then said, do you understand at trial? Hold on, y'all, let me pull this up real quick. Okay. He said, do you understand at the trial? What's up, misunderstood? Do you understand at the trial that you would have the right to testify or not testify as you choose? And if you choose not to testify, neither the government or the court could comment on your refusal to testify. Do you understand that? Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. What's going on, LaShawn Davis? Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. The judge says, do you understand that if you were found guilty by a judge or a jury, and if you agree with that verdict, you would have the right to an appeal? Do you understand that? Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. The judge then said, Mr. Hill, these are many of your constitutional rights, and I'm going to go over them with you. By entering the plea of guilty, you are giving up those rights. There won't be a trial. You will be adjudged as guilty of each of these charges in counts 1 and 2 of the indictment. Your right to appeal will be very limited as set forth in the plea agreement. Do you understand that? What's up in his service? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. Judge then says, knowing that, do you want to go forward and enter the pleas of guilty? Mr. Hill, Travell Hill, pled guilty. He said, yes, sir. The judge then said, any question about any of that? Mr. Hill said, no, sir. The judge says, I also want to touch on one other thing with regards to your rights. You have the right to file pretrial motions. I know after discussion, you and your attorney indicated to the magistrate that you were waiving your right to file pretrial motions, and you did have a full opportunity to discuss that issue with Mr. Cohen. You did agree to waive any pretrial motions. Is that correct? Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. Okay. The judge says, and again, you are doing all of this freely and voluntarily. Is that correct? Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. The judge says, I referenced a guilty plea agreement. There is, in fact, a written guilty plea agreement in this case, and you have a copy of it there on the counter in front of you. I want you to flip to the back page of that document. I have the original with me. On that back page, and it is a 13-page document, on the back page, there are 3 signatures. The top signature is that the assistant attorney's, is that of the assistant state's attorney. The bottom signature is your attorney's signature, and the one in the middle is your signature. Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge then says, and is it signed and dated? Is this actually signed and dated May 27th of this year? But well in advance of that date, you had a full opportunity to read over the agreement, understand what it means and what it says. Is that correct? Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. The judge then says, you also had an opportunity to go over it with Mr. Cohen. He answered any questions that you might have about that agreement. Is that correct? Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. The judge then says, did you sign and enter into this agreement freely and voluntarily? Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. The judge says, now I want you to go through certain aspects of this agreement. I want to go over certain aspects of this agreement with you. Excuse me, y'all. I'm not going to go through every single line of this, but as I go through this, if there's anything that you don't understand, stop me and let me know. All right? All right, sir? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir.
Sorry, I don't know that one.
Alexa, go to sleep. Okay, here we go. The judge says, on the first page of the agreement, it starts out with who the parties are to this agreement. The parties to this agreement are you and your attorney and the assistant state's attorney. it is important for you to understand that the court, I'm not a party to this agreement. I'll certainly consider this agreement at the time of sentencing, but I'm not a party to this agreement. Do you understand that, sir? Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. The second section sets out the basic framework of this plea agreement. It indicates, in exchange for your voluntary pleas of guilty to the charges of counts 1 and 2 of the superseding indictment, the government is agreeing that there will be no further federal prosecution brought in this district relative to your agreement to use a facility of interstate commerce, a cellular telephone, to commit the murder of Andre Montgomery in exchange for monetary compensation on or about March 14, 2016, of which the government is now aware. So as y'all see, for those of y'all who don't know much about this case, this young man murdered Andre Montgomery, who was the nephew of Tim Norman, where they had the famous show on called Sweetie Pies. This is the actual man who pulled the trigger. Okay? Says here, it goes on to the next paragraph in that section to indicate that after the court determines the guideline range, and we will talk more about the sentencing guidelines in just a moment, either side can ask for a sentence below or above the guideline range it is ultimately determined. So that's the basic framework of this plea agreement. Do you understand that, sir? Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. The judge says, any question about any of that? Mr. Hill said, no, sir. The judge says, so the next section deals with the elements of each of the offenses that you are pleading guilty to. The elements are those things that the government would have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt before a judge or a jury could find you guilty of these charges. I want to go over these elements with you. As to count 1, the first element is that at the beginning, at the time unknown, but up to and including March 14, 2016, through the date of the superseding indictment in the city of St. Louis and elsewhere within the Eastern District of Missouri, you and others reached an agreement to commit the crime of use of a facility of an interstate commerce, which was a cellular telephone, with the intent that a murder be committed in violation of the laws of the state of Missouri in exchange for or in consideration for something of pecuniary value. And second, that you voluntarily and intentionally joined in that agreement either at the time it was first reached or at some later time it was still in effect. And third, that at the time that you joined in that agreement, you knew the illegal purpose of that agreement. How you doing, Donald Davis? How are you? Welcome to the channel. It says, fourth, that while the agreement was still in effect, a person or persons who had joined in the agreement knowingly undertook one or more overt acts for the purpose of carrying out or carrying forward that agreement. And again, the agreement is to commit the murder. And finally, that the death of Andre Montgomery resulted from that conspiracy on March 14th, 2016. So, those are the elements of count 1. Do you understand those elements? Is that correct? Anthony Hill says yes. Travell Hill says yes. Then the judge says, as to count 2, the elements of that offense are for the following. On or about March 14, 2016, you use a cellular telephone, a facility of interstate commerce. And second, that the cellular telephone was used with the intent that a murder be committed in violation of the laws of the state. That third, something of pecuniary value was received or promised to be paid as consideration for the murder. And fourth, that the death of Andre Montgomery resulted. So those are the elements of count 2. Do you understand those elements, or you understand those elements? Is that correct? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge says, do you agree that you did those things? That you agree that you did those things? Is that correct? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge says the next section of the plea agreement is, it is on pages 4, 5, and page 6. It is certain facts that you and your attorney and the assistant United States attorney have agreed are true and correct. You have read through and understand those facts. Is that right? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge says, do you agree that all of those facts are true and correct and that you did those things? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge says, now, I'm going to ask the Assistant United States Attorney to briefly outline the government's evidence what the government's evidence would have been in the case that it proceeded to trial. Again, I want you to listen carefully to this. And Miss Dennis, if you would outline what the government's evidence would be in the case, I just ask that you do that slowly so that the court reporter can get that. So then Mrs. Dennis comes in. I assume that this is the government. I assume that, or this is the Assistant United States Attorney. Okay, so this is what they say they had against Mr. Hill. So Miss Dennis says, yes, Your Honor. Would you prefer that I stand or sit? Do you have a preference? The judge says, you fine as long as you speak into the microphone. So Ms. Dennis says, thank you, Your Honor. Had this matter proceeded to trial, the government would have proven the following beyond a reasonable doubt through competent evidence and testimony that on March 14, 2016, at approximately 8:02 p.m., Andre Montgomery, hereinafter I'll refer to as Montgomery, was killed by gunfire at 3964 Natural Bridge Avenue, which is located in the city of St. Louis within the Eastern District of Missouri. Montgomery's cellular telephone was located in close proximity to his body and was forensically examined following his murder. Witnesses at the scene of the homicide indicated that Montgomery went outside to meet someone after receiving a telephone call and was shot and killed shortly thereafter. Several days prior to March 17, 2016, the defendant Travell Hill had met with a unindicted or unindicated mutual acquaintance of Hill and co-defendant James Timothy Norman, who was Montgomery's uncle. At the meeting, the mutual acquaintance informed Hill that Norman wanted Montgomery dead and that Montgomery was staying at a hotel located in St. Louis. On March 14, 2016, Hill met with Norman at Norman's request south of downtown St. Louis, Missouri, near the Peabody housing complex within the Eastern District of Missouri. It says which was where Hill was residing at the time. Norman met with Hill for the purpose of having a discussion. Following the discussion, it was Hill's understanding that Norman wanted Hill to kill Montgomery, Norman's nephew. Norman advised Hill that a female, whom Hill now knows to be the co-defendant Terica Ellis, would be contacting him on his cellular phone, and the phone number in which was 314-665-5999, to advise Hill where Montgomery would be located for the purpose of committing the murder. After the meeting with Norman on March 17, 2016, Hill obtained a .38 caliber semi-automatic firearm from someone nearby his residence. Hill chose this type of firearm among other things. It was small and could be easily concealed inside his sweatshirt. Later in that day, on March 14, 2016, Hill received a call on his cellular telephone from Terica Ellis. Ellis advised Hill of the address where Montgomery could be located and advised Hill that she was going to lure Montgomery outside of the house, which would allow Hill to commit the murder. They had this thing set up perfectly. Damn. Ugh. After utilizing his cellular telephone to learn the address of Montgomery's location from Terica Ellis, Hill traveled to the location, which was near the intersection of Natural Bridge and Warner Avenue. Hill arrived there armed with a .38 caliber handgun. Hill observed Montgomery emerge from the residence at 3964 Natural Bridge, but Hill was unsure if it was actually Montgomery initially. In order to get closer to him to confirm his identity, Hill asked Montgomery if he had any marijuana. At that time, Hill confirmed that it was, in fact, Montgomery. In front of the residence at 3964 Natural Bridge, Hill watched as Montgomery approached the vehicle and spoke with at least one occupant in the vehicle, with whom Hill assumed to be Ellis, but Hill was unable to see inside the vehicle at the time. Hill then watched as Montgomery turned to walk back towards the residence at 3964 Natural Bridge. Hill then said something to stop Montgomery. Hill walked closer to him, then discharged his firearm multiple times, striking Montgomery. Hill then fled the scene, disposing of both his cellular telephone and a firearm. Montgomery ultimately died inside the residence as a result of the gunshot wounds. On March 16, 2016, Norman contacted Hill and advised Hill to meet with a separate individual who was known to both Hill and Norman. The same day, Hill met with the individual near the intersection of Chateau and Dillon in the city of St. Louis. During a brief meeting, the individual handed Hill a bag containing approximately $5,000 in the United States currency, in which time the individual told Hill the words to the effect of "keep your mouth quiet." Boy, $5,000. Hill accepted the payment, knowing that it was payment from Norman in exchange for killing Montgomery. By the court, and again, Mr. Hill, the judge says, and again, Mr. Hill, do you agree that those facts, along with facts in the plea agreement, they are true and correct, and that you did these things? Is that right, sir? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. Judge says the next section of the plea agreement deals with the statutory range of punishment for these offenses that you are pleading guilty to. The statutory range of punishment on each count is a term of imprisonment of not more than life. Can also include the possibility of a fine or both such fine. That won't no doggone money, $5,000. Fine and imprisonment. The court also may impose a period of supervised release of not more than 3 years on each count. And we will talk about supervised release in just a moment. But you do understand the statutory range of punishment is up to life on each count, and you understand that. Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. Ms. Dennis says, and Your Honor, may I interject? It is actually a mandatory term of life on both counts. I just wanted to make sure to clear that record. The judge says, and that is because an element of the offense is that it resulted in death. Is that correct, Ms. Dennis? Ms. Dennis says, that's correct, Your Honor. Thank you. The judge then says, by the court, and do you understand that as well, Mr. Hill? Again, because the offense involved and resulted in the death of Mr. Montgomery, there is a statutory, mandatory sentence of life. And you understand that. Is that correct? Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. The judge then says the next section deals with the sentencing guidelines. The sentencing guidelines are a set of rules that were adopted as a result of the Sentencing Reform Act. They assign certain offense levels to certain types of criminal conduct, such as the conduct that we're pleading guilty to here today. There's a chart that has the offense levels on it. There can also be an adjustment for a criminal history score and category that's based on whether prior record of a criminal conviction that a person may have, and from that we get a guideline range of punishment. At the time of the sentencing, the first thing that the court is required to do is to determine that the guideline range is what the guideline range is. After I do that, I'll consider certain factors under a section of the statute. Hold on. At the time of sentencing, first thing required to do determine okay. After I do, I'll consider certain factors under the certain section of the statutes. It is 18 USC section 3553A. There are a series of factors that the court can consider. They include the nature of the circumstances of the offenses and that you are pleading guilty to. What's up, Tears? What's going on? That you are pleading guilty to. The history and characteristics of you as a defendant, and there are a number of other factors that the court will consider. But again, it is important for you to understand that based on the elements of the offense, the government is indicating at the statute would indicate that there is a mandatory term of imprisonment of life in prison. And you understand that on each of these counts, and you understand that is correct. So y'all, why in the hell did he take a plea if he was already going? Let me read this. We'll talk in a few. This don't make no sense. So Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. Judge says the plea agreement goes on to talk about how the guidelines may apply in this case. Again, you need to understand that the statute would require, but it does indicate that in the plea agreement that the parties agree that the base offense level would be offense level 43, that 3 levels would be deducted from, okay, so 3 levels would be deducted for your acceptance of responsibility. If you do the math, you come up with a estimated total offense level of 40. So it was a 43. They deducted 3 points off. Okay. Again, all those things are determined by the court, by me, and at the time of sentencing, along with determining your criminal history. So there are no promises being made to you here today, other than the fact that the court has to consider the statutory mandatory sentence that we have talked about, and you understand all of that. Is that correct? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge says, so again, do you understand that there are no promises being made to you here today? Nobody has promised you anything about what would happen at the time of sentencing. There have been no other representations to you of any kind to get you to plea of guilty. Is that correct? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. Justice, any questions about any of that? Any questions about any of that? Mr. Hill says, no, sir. The judge says, moving through the plea agreement. The plea agreement talks about waiving certain appeal rights. Again, I'm on page 8 of the plea agreement. You are waiving your right to appeal all non-judicial. Sorry, y'all. Ooh, long day. You are waiving your right to appeal all non-jurisdictional, non-sentencing issues, including but not limited to any issue related to the filing or not filing of pretrial motions, the discovery in this case, or the circumstances of a guilty plea. With regard to the sentencing issues, if after determining the guideline range, the court sentences you within or below that range, or sentences you to the statutory required sentence, then by the terms of this plea agreement, you are waiving your right to appeal the sentencing issues, with the exception of the issue of your criminal history. Moving on to page 9 at the top, it talks about you waiving you waiving any post-conviction appeal rights or habeas corpus rights, except as it relates to any possible claim for prosecutorial misconduct or ineffective assistance of counsel. So again, those are all appeal rights that you are giving up by entering the pleas of guilty here today. Do you understand those? Mr. Hill says, yes. Okay? Then the judge says, and there at the bottom of the page, page 9, on the top of page 10, it talks about supervised release. I mentioned earlier, supervised release is a system that was put in place when parole was abolished in the federal system. It is a set of conditions that can be placed on your release from the Bureau of Prisons. If in fact you are released from the Bureau of Prisons, those conditions are limitations on your liberty. If you violate the conditions, you can be sent back to the Bureau of Prisons. Do you understand that? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge says, and there is a provision on page 10 with regard to a mandatory special assignment. There is also a provision with regard to restitution. Do you understand those provisions? Do you understand that as part of the final judgment, I'll order that if I determine that those things are due and owing, I'll order you to pay those. And do you understand that? Is that correct? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge says, it is the procedure of the court pursuant to local rule to hold a closed conference in every plea and every sentencing hearing. This portion of the proceeding is not public. The records are sealed. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are observing, I'm going to ask that you step outside the courtroom. Again, this portion of the proceeding is not public. The records are sealed. This is pursuant to our local rule in every plea and every sentencing case. We will bring you right back in as soon as we conclude this portion of the proceeding, but I'll ask all of you if you will step outside for just a moment. The court security officer will bring you in as soon as we complete this portion of the proceeding. Thank you for your understanding. What's up, Wings? Okay. So pursuant to Local Rule 1305, a bench conference was held on the record and placed under seal. The following proceeding continued in open court. Let me see. The judge says moving through the plea agreement on page 11 and on the top of page 12, Mr. Hill, it talks about you acknowledging your waiving your rights. I have gone over many of your rights with you here today. They are set out here in the plea agreement. I'm sure Mr. Cohen has also gone over those with you. Do you believe you understand all your rights, Mr. Hill? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge then says, do you understand that you are giving up those rights by entering the plea of guilty here today? Is that correct? Mr. Hill said, yes, sir. The judge says, the next section deals with the voluntary nature of the guilty plea agreement. You are here. You being here today freely and voluntarily, I just want to ask you again with regard to this guilty plea. Did you sign and enter into that agreement freely and voluntarily? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge says, are you here today entering this plea of guilty freely and voluntarily? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge says, other than the representations in the guilty plea agreement and the things that have been said to you here today on the record, has anyone promised you anything, threatened you in any way, made any other representation to you of any kind to get you to plea to the plea of guilty here today? Mr. Hill said, no, sir. The judge says the next section, with consequences of post-plea misconduct. What that means, Mr. Hill, is this. If the court accepts your plea of guilty here today, I'm going to order a pre-sentence report to be prepared. It is a lengthy, thorough report into your background and history. It takes time to do that. It takes a few months. I'll also, I'll defer sentencing in the interim. You can't violate the law. You have to do what the marshals tell you to do. You have to abide by the terms of the plea agreement. Do you understand all of that, sir? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge says, and then the last section of the plea agreement deals with the fact that you would not be able to withdraw this guilty plea at any time. This is very, very important, Mr. Hill, what it means in this. If the court accepts your pleas of guilty here today, there are no circumstances under which I would allow you to withdraw your guilty plea. So you can't change your mind tonight, tomorrow, or the next day, anytime in the future. You have to know that this is what you want to do. It is very important. There are no circumstances under which I will allow you to withdraw these guilty pleas. Do you understand that, sir? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge says, and again, knowing that you still want to go forward and plea to the pleas of guilty, is that correct? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge says, any question about anything I have said or anything in the guilty plea agreement? Mr. Hill says, can you say that again? The judge says, I'm sorry, any question about anything I have said or anything in the guilty plea agreement? Mr. Hill says, no, sir. The judge says the court finds the guilty plea agreement was entered into freely and voluntarily and intelligently. It will be accepted and incorporated into the record. Then his lawyer speaks up and says, Mr. Cohen, anything further on your behalf of the defendant before the court would consider finally accepting his pleas of guilty? Mr. Cohen says, no, Your Honor, thank you. The judge then says, anything further on behalf of the government, Ms. Dennis? Ms. Dennis says, no, Your Honor, thank you. The judge then says, again, Mr. Hill, I know I've asked you this a number of times. You understand all of this? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge says, any question about any of it? Mr. Hill said, no, sir. The judge then says, then for the record, sir, on the charge in count 1 and count 2, count 1 and count 1, conspiracy to commit murder for hire resulting in death, and count 2, murder for hire resulting in death. How do you wish to plead to those charges, guilty or not guilty? He pled guilty. The judge then says, the court finds that the defendant's pleas of guilty are entered into freely, voluntarily, and intelligently with a full understanding of the charges and the consequences of the pleas, which the understanding of his rights related to a jury trial and the effect of the pleas of guilty on those rights. The court finds that there is a factual basis for each of these pleas of guilty. Therefore, the court will accept the defendant's pleas of guilty to the offenses as charged in counts 1 and counts 2 of the indictment. Now again, Mr. Hill, I'm going to order a pre-sentence report to be prepared. It is important that you cooperate with the probation office in preparation of that report. You and your attorney will get a copy of the report well in advance of the date of sentencing. You can go over it and file objections to it. You can present evidence at the time of sentencing. The government can also do things. Do you understand that, sir? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge says, and I order the pre-sentence report to be prepared. Counsel, the date I have for sentencing is Tuesday, September 20th of 2022 at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The date for objections in September 6th of 2022, and I'll enter into a written order for the dates and times of any further on the record. Mr. Cohen. Mr. Cohen, no, Your Honor, thank you. The court says anything further on the behalf of the government, Ms. Dennis? Ms. Dennis says, no, Your Honor, thank you. The judge says again, Mr. Hill, do you have any questions of any kind? Mr. Hill said, no, sir. The judge says, and again, You have understand it all. Is that correct? Mr. Hill says, yes, sir. The judge then says, okay, and I'll see you on that date of sentencing, and that will include the record. You will be remanded to the custody of the marshals at this time. This will conclude the record. The proceedings are concluded at 2:46 p.m. So, wow. So that was that, y'all. So that was his plea. There's a lot more stuff in here that I'm going to be going over the next couple of days. So here's my question. And maybe y'all know. I mean, the guy was going to get, now, did y'all see, let me see what he ended up getting. What was his actual sentence? Does anyone in the chat know what his actual sentence was? I guess they had his sentencing. Hold on. Y'all hold one moment. Let me pull this up. I want to see what he was actually sentenced to. Let's see. What was Travell Hill sentenced? Sentenced to. Okay, so it says here that U.S. District Judge John A. Ross on Thursday sentenced a St. Louis man who killed a reality show star nephew to 32 years in prison. Travell Anthony Hill, 31, pleaded guilty in June to 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder for hire and 1 count of murder for hire and the death of Andre Montgomery. Okay, so, wow. So he was sentenced to 32 years, y'all. So I guess he figured a 30 in. Let me see. Yeah, I agree. A vibe called Yes says you gotta be a different type of low down and dirty plot, something like this. Yeah, you really do. You can't have a heart to do something like this, right? You gotta really be the type where you just don't care. They should have given him life. Yeah, well he took that plea for a reason, because I guess he feel as though, that plea he would have had a better chance. So in his case, 32 years. Let me see. That's Fed time. So he only got to do 85% of Fed time. You probably get out. No, that ain't nothing compared for what he did. That's true. So he'll be out, he'll be out much sooner than 30-some years. They wanted the death penalty. Oh, they did, Riri? Riri said they wanted the death penalty. He could make it out of there. Yeah, oh yeah, he probably will get out of there, y'all. He probably will get out of there. But y'all listen, rest in peace to Andre. I'm pretty sure his family definitely had it rough and they're still going through, especially around the holidays right now, y'all. But, I just wanted to come on here, y'all. I'm going to be reading more of these transcripts. I'm going to get with some of my team, and so we can bring this thing to life for y'all a lot more. But listen, y'all have a blessed night. I'll let y'all get some rest. I got to get some rest too because I got to get up early. Crafting with your flamboyant creator says, you get life for selling drugs, but you could take someone and have a chance to get out. Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Linez Butte says federal and state laws differ. He probably was facing the death penalty. Okay. Indeed. Well, y'all listen. Y'all have a great night. If you are someone who's watching this, want to leave your comments, please leave your comments in the comment section. Okay? Leave your comments in the comment section. If y'all will please hit the like button on the way out. I do appreciate y'all. If you want to throw a blessing in the Cash App for your bro or to help me pay for future transcripts, I pay for these, straight out of pocket or whatever. It's all good. But if you want to be a blessing and help out, just hit the Cash App. Let me see. Ty said, Atmos, I wish you could have covered the Darrell Brooks trial. Well, yeah, listen, the Darrell Brooks trial, Ty, we'll be here all night. The way that dude was mumbling and grumbling and bumbling and fumbling, and y'all will get mad at me. Y'all will get really mad at me because he was just too irritating. Too irritating. But all right, y'all, y'all have a blessed night. I will holler at y'all later on. Okay? Peace out.